The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. This is Jennifer Schaus coming to you live from Washington, D.C., and thanks for joining us in our Webinar Wednesday series. We host a webinar every Wednesday the entire year, focused on various government contracting topics. Our speakers range from accountants, attorneys, and other industry professionals that are sharing their knowledge about the sector. All of our webinars are listed on our website under the webinar section, and they are all recorded. You can find those under the archived webinar section, or you can follow us on YouTube, where the entirety of all of our webinars is listed. Again, they're all complimentary and recorded. If you do have questions today about the topic, which is HUBZone certification, you can contact our speaker, Oris Jovic, referred to as OJ. His contact information will be listed on the very last slide. It'll include his phone number and email address. So thanks again for joining us. Just a quick blurb about us. We are based in downtown DC and provide professional services for federal contractors, both product companies and service companies. Our services range from market analysis reports, proposal writing, contract compliance, certifications, contract vehicles, including the GSA schedule, and more. As I mentioned, we do host these webinars every single Wednesday. We've also got some conferences and events that we put on throughout the year. You can find those on our website under the events section. A little bit about OJ, listed here on this slide. If you have further questions for him, again, based on today's topic or other government contracting legal matters, you can contact him directly. He's currently counsel with McMahon, Welch & Learned out in Tyson's Corner. So again, our topic today is HUBZone certification and recent changes. And OJ, thanks so much for sharing your time, your knowledge, your expertise, and insight on this hot topic. I'll turn the floor over to you now.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to your company for hosting this. Thank you to all who are attending. Today's topic, as Jennifer said, is HUBZone certification and recent changes. Hopefully, I won't make this too dry, although it is a fairly dry topic. But hopefully we can pack a lot of information into the few minutes that we have here today. Next slide, please. So what is the HUBZone program? If it's brand new to you, it's the abbreviation for Historically Underutilized Business Zone Program, which was created in 1998 by the HUBZone Empowerment Act, and it's administered by the Small Business Administration, but with a lot of input from the IRS and from Department of Housing and what used to be Housing and Urban Development, which now is HHS, I believe. Anyway, it's designed to help small businesses in certain areas, certain geographical areas, gain preferential access to federal procurement opportunities. Next slide, please. The first question to ask regarding a HUBZone is, what is it? It's an area in one of the following: a qualified census tract, which is defined by the IRS based on certain criteria regarding income levels, poverty levels, and the ratios of those to the surrounding communities. It can also be in a qualified non-metropolitan county. Again, is defined by the IRS based on certain criteria: household income less than 80% of state median non-metropolitan household income, or an unemployment rate of not less than 140% of the statewide average. It can also be in a geographical area that's within the external boundaries of an Indian reservation. Also, a qualified base closure area. When the military closes bases, it often has a severe economic impact on the area, and then that area could be qualified as a HUBZone. And the last type of area is what's called a redesignated area, which basically is an area that used to be in a HUBZone geographically, but no longer is. However, the area, the HUBZone businesses in the area are grandfathered in for a certain period of time as HUBZones in these redesignated areas. Next slide, please. So is your business eligible for the HUBZone program? Well, the first question to ask is it a small business under the SBA standards, which you're probably very familiar with, the NAICS codes and the various size standards that qualify a business to be small, along with the ownership criteria and the other criteria. Currently, a HUBZone business must be owned and controlled at least 51% by U.S. citizens, in other words, real human beings. But that is changing effective May 25th of this year, and we'll discuss that a little bit later in this presentation. If you're not a person, real live human being, currently a HUBZone can be owned by a community development corporation, an agricultural cooperative, or an Indian tribe. So those are the only three types of corporate entities that currently, until next week, can own and control a HUBZone. And again, we'll talk about the change a little bit later. The principal office of the building must be located in a HUBZone. And we talked about that in the previous slide and how HUBZones are defined geographically. At least 35% of the employees of that business must live in a HUBZone. Importantly, not necessarily the same HUBZone as the business. That's a mistake a lot of people make when thinking about whether or not they qualify to be a HUBZone business. The full qualification and continued eligibility criteria are in what we call the Small Business Regulation at 13 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 126. And as usual with any government program, it's complicated and very involved. Next slide, please. So why become a HUBZone? What are the benefits? Well, most importantly, as a HUBZone, you can qualify for both competitive and sole source set-aside procurements, federal procurements that are earmarked, basically, for HUBZone businesses. In other words, only HUBZone businesses can compete on those if it's competitive. And the sole source procurements, of course, are the real cherries because they are directly awarded to a HUBZone business with no competition. HUBZone businesses also get a 10% price evaluation preference in full and open procurements. So these are procurements where you might be competing against large contractors, the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grummans. Even if your price is 10% above theirs, you'll be on an equal footing with them. Also importantly, HUBZones qualify or benefit from certain subcontracting opportunities to large primes. Again, the Lockheed Martins and Northrop Grummans, and even smaller companies. But they have to file subcontracting plans with the government, telling the government how many subcontracting dollars they're going to award to different types of small businesses, whether they be HUBZone, women-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned, 8A, etc. And they're graded on whether or not they fulfill those quotas, quote unquote. So as a HUBZone, you can qualify to be a subcontractor in one of those lanes for the larger primes. The goal of the HUBZone program, or of the government, is to award 3% of all federal prime contract dollars to HUBZone certified small businesses. And that is a figure that the government has missed by a wide margin for many, many years. Next slide, please. How do you apply to be a HUBZone? Well, the first step is to check SBA's HUBZone map to determine whether your principal office and the required percentage of employees live in a HUBZone, have a residence in a HUBZone. Have or obtain a SAM.gov account. Most of you are probably familiar with the System for Award Management, how to get on there, how to register, and how to update your account on that site. Also, pre-check your qualifications at SBA's Certify site. And SBA has a pretty good online system of directing you to a series of questions and answers and information regarding whether or not you should even apply. have or obtain an SBA general login system account if you're actually going to apply, and then follow the online prompts and check your email for instructions. That's all pretty simple, and it's pretty well laid out on the SBA website online. And then submit any request supporting documents within 10 days. If you do qualify as a HUBZone, you need to recertify every 3 years if you're still qualified. Next slide, please. So now we'll talk about some of the major recent changes to the HUBZone program. And this is the one I referenced earlier in the presentation. By a direct final rule, in other words, this came out in the Federal Register, saying here's the new rule, and it's going to be effective May 25th of this year. The 51% ownership requirement need not be direct. It can be met through corporate vehicles. So whereas today, you need to be a real live human person holding 51% of a company in order to qualify for the HUBZone program, later this month and forever after, unless there's another rule change. This provides you greater flexibility in structuring a potential HUBZone company. In other words, if you own a company, call it ABC LLC, it's not located in a HUBZone, but you fulfill all the other criteria of a HUBZone, you could open a subsidiary in a HUBZone. And if you meet all the other criteria, that subsidiary would be qualified as a HUBZone company. Next slide, please. This is the very busy slide, which are the recent changes that came out of the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act. And most of these changes will be effective January 1st, 2020. So it's a year and a half or so down the road. The HUBZone maps, which we discussed a little bit earlier regarding how do you find out whether you're in a geographic HUBZone area, those are to be frozen, and no changes to those maps until at least January 1st, 2020. And that's supposedly effective now. We'll see if that actually does happen. But basically, if you look at your principal office, if it's in a HUBZone, it will remain in a HUBZone. Be no changes until at least the beginning of 2020. The Act also required SBA to update the online map less frequently based on creating a new online tool. And that is to be updated only every 5 years for most HUBZones. Again, we'll see how SBA does in creating this new, quote, online tool, unquote, what it provides and how often it will be updated. And of course, updating HUBZone maps is important because it basically, if you find yourself forming a company in a HUBZone and a couple of years later that area is no longer in a HUBZone, you'd only have a limited amount of time to remain HUBZone qualified before you are proposed for decertification. So this change most likely will allow companies to remain HUBZone qualified for longer periods of time. Another change is the base closure HUBZone will be when SBA designates in a HUBZone. Currently, it is when the base closes. But from experience, we found out that when bases close, they sometimes do that slowly over a period of months or even years, and they draw down troops and personnel. And the economic impact is not an on-off switch or an off-on switch. It happens gradually over a period of months or years. So now going forward, base closure HUBZone areas will be designated when SBA designates it, and that could be before the actual base closure. Also, the base closure area may remain a HUBZone indefinitely, but not less than 8 years. Again, this is an attempt to ensure that businesses have some certainty in their planning. If they become HUBZones, they'll know that they can remain HUBZones for at least 8 years if they're in a base closure area. The next one is a little bit complicated, but it's a change to the The comparison of income levels, median household income will be against the statewide median household income, not just the statewide non-metropolitan median household income. So that'll help in qualifying businesses under the ratios required for income and poverty levels, etc. Another change is that state governors will be able to request that SBA designate certain areas as hub zones, but they can do that. They're limited to one request per year, and that would be if a governor wanted to designate an area that doesn't fall into one of the other hub zone geographical criteria, he or she could request that SBA designate that certain area as a hub zone. But again, that's only one time per year. Hub zone applications currently take about 116 days on average to process, and the Act requires SBA to process hub zone applications in 60 days, again, effective January 1st, 2020. That probably means that SBA will have to staff up a little bit in order to meet that goal. But on the other hand, if they do actually meet that goal, that'll help hub zone businesses get qualified more quickly. And SBA will be required to publicly maintain publicly the available list of current hub zone concerns, which they basically do to one degree or another, but this is envisioned as one place online where prime contractors, large primes, can go and get a list of hub zone concerns, probably including the types of work that they do, so that they can then reach out to the hub zone concerns and see if they can't be subcontractors to those larger primes in order to help them fulfill their subcontracting plan requirements. Next slide, please. So we've discussed some of these already, but the effects of these recent changes, well, fewer changes to the hub zone map equals more certainty for hub zone concerns. Hub zone concerns should be able to remain hub zones longer than they currently do. The program should expand to more areas, more geographical areas. States, through their governors, will have more input in designated hub zone areas, but again, governor can do that one time per year. The non-direct ownership will allow more flexibility, joint ventures or subsidiaries, again, as we previously discussed. Faster processing of applications, that's great, but it also may require new SBA resources. And the government might actually achieve its 3% goal finally after all these long years. Next slide, please. And that's the end of the presentation. I thank you all for attending. I hope that we provided some useful information. And my contact information is on this last slide. If you have any questions, please feel free to call or email me. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody, for attending, and thanks, OJ, for sharing your knowledge and expertise. Sounds like there's some nice improvements there for the HUBZone program. Next week, on Wednesday, May 23rd, we are covering to bid or not to bid. The week after, May 30th, we are covering CPARS, and then the following week takes us into June. June 6th is contract compliance. Actually, the entire year, we have already scheduled all of the topics and speakers, so take a look at our website under the webinar section if you wish to register for any of the upcoming webinars. Again, they are all recorded and complimentary. If you do have questions about today's presentation or wish to contact OJ, please call him at 703-483-2817, and his email address is listed there. Thanks again, everybody, and thanks again, OJ. This concludes the webinar.